Fusion should have been the defining mechanic of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. It has everything the series likes. Two familiar monsters disappear, the field fills with light, and a new creature arrives carrying pieces of both. The process is easy to understand before anybody explains a rule. It creates surprise without making the old cards irrelevant. It can turn a losing position into an entirely new possibility. Most importantly, fusion makes cooperation visible. Two monsters become stronger because they enter the same body. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters never builds its entire game around that idea. Yugi has several famous fusion monsters, though his deck never feels like a fusion deck. Joey owns monsters that became purple fusion cards in the physical game, though he summons some of them without polymerization. Kaiba creates one of the most recognizable fusions in the franchise, then spends most of the series treating it as the final form of a single obsession. The rules tighten, loosen, and occasionally disappear depending on the duel. The result is messy. It is also one of the most revealing parts of the original series. Fusion begins as imagination, becomes a regulated tournament mechanic, and eventually returns as mythology. Every version tells us what Yu-Gi-Oh! Believed the card game was supposed to do at that moment. Before we get into it, subscribe if you enjoy these deeper Yu-Gi-Oh! Character and story analyses. There is a lot more coming. The first thing to remember is that Kazuki Takahashi did not begin Yu-Gi-Oh! As the story of one trading card game. The early manga moved from one dangerous game to another. Yugi could challenge somebody with cards, dice knives, a tabletop role-playing game, or a contest invented for a single chapter. The shadow game mattered more than the commercial rules. A game exposed a person's nature, and the punishment followed whatever weakness that person had revealed. The card game, originally called Magic and Wizards in the Japanese manga, entered this world as another one of those games. Reader interest kept pulling Takahashi back to it. Seto Kaiba gave it a rival, Pegasus gave it a creator, Duelist Kingdom gave it enough space to become the center of the manga. The rules were still being invented while the story was already using them. Fusion carries the marks of that origin more clearly than almost any other mechanic. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Gives fusion summoning a clean procedure. A card such as polymerization uses specified materials from permitted locations, those materials go away, and the correct fusion monster comes from the extra deck. The recipe exists before the summon. Gaia the Dragon Champion requires Gaia the Fierce Knight and Curse of Dragon. Black Skull Dragon requires Summon Skull and Red Eyes Black Dragon. The purple card tells both players exactly what the combination produces. The early manga approaches the idea from the opposite direction. Polymerization feels like an act performed on living creatures. The question is less about locating a printed recipe and more about imagining what these particular monsters would become together. Takahashi draws the answer. The duel accepts it. The monster now exists. That freedom is why fusion feels so natural in Duelist Kingdom, an arc where monster biology and the environment are practically part of the rulebook. Flying monsters cross terrain. Sea monsters hide underwater. Machines resist magic. Fire spreads. The moon can affect the tide because a card image is temporarily treated like an actual moon hanging over an actual ocean. Inside that system, combining a knight with a dragon makes immediate sense. Gaia the Fierce Knight already looks like a rider waiting for a mount. Curse of Dragon provides the wings and the body. Gaia the Dragon Champion requires almost no explanation because its design completes an idea that was already present in both monsters. The summon feels clever even though polymerization performs most of the mechanical work. This is fusion in its purest Duelist Kingdom form. The pleasure comes from recognition. The audience sees the pieces, understands the visual relationship, and receives the combined creature as an answer to the current problem. The physical card is much harsher about the transaction. Polymerization, Gaia, and Curse of Dragon are 3 cards spent to produce one monster with 2600 attack and no original effect. Early competitive fusion often asked for too many specific cards in exchange for a large body that could still be removed. Duelist Kingdom rarely asks the viewer to sit with that arithmetic. Drawing the exact 3 pieces is treated as destiny, skill, or the heart of the cards. The emotional value of the combination matters more than its efficiency. That choice gives the anime some of its greatest images. It also prevents fusion from becoming a dependable strategy. Yugi cannot build a clear game plan around a mechanic that arrives whenever the story finds the correct combination beautiful. Black Skull Dragon improves the idea by making the materials belong to different people. During the duel against the Paradox Brothers, Yugi and Joey are trapped in a maze that separates their monsters and punishes poor coordination. Their answer combines Yugi's Summon Skull with Joey's Red Eyes Black Dragon. One monster carries Yugi's dark power, the other carries Joey's potential. The resulting dragon belongs to their partnership more than either individual deck. This is one of the smartest uses of fusion in the entire franchise. The card does exactly what the scene needs emotionally. Yugi has spent Duelist Kingdom helping Joey grow into an independent duelist. Joey still depends on him, and his progress is genuine. Black Skull Dragon allows both truths to occupy the field at once. Joey contributes an irreplaceable material. Yugi provides the knowledge and the other half. Their ace exists because they trust each other enough to combine resources. The maze briefly stops the flying monster from advancing, which sounds absurd under the physical game's rules and feels perfectly ordinary under Duelist Kingdoms. The environment still has authority. Fusion creates a new creature, and that creature has to live inside the world of the board. Kaiba's Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon takes the same mechanic in another emotional direction. 3 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon fuse into one creature with 3 heads and 4,500 attack. The materials all belong to Kaiba. They are the 3 surviving copies of the rarest card he values, gathered through an obsession that has already destroyed lives. His greatest fusion contains no compromise and no outside contribution. It concentrates ownership. There is a strange piece of card game logic inside the summon. 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons represent 9,000 attacks spread across 3 bodies. Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon compresses them into 4,500 attack in one body. The monster becomes easier to protect and can focus its power through a single attack, though the raw numbers reveal how much Kaiba sacrifices for the image of perfection. He wants the Ultimate Dragon because ultimate is how he understands victory. 3 excellent monsters still look unfinished to him. Yugi defeats that ideal through the wildest fusion interaction in the series. Living Arrow lets him direct polymerization toward Kaiba's monster and attach Mammoth Graveyard to Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. A living creature has been fused with an undead one. The incompatible body begins decaying from within and loses attack over time. Calling this a legal fusion summon misses why the move has survived in people's memory. It operates like a curse from a fantasy story. Yugi cannot overpower the monster, so he changes its nature. Kaiba's perfect body becomes a prison, carrying its own death. Polymerization has stopped being a machine that produces approved recipes. It becomes invasive magic. The sequence also shows why early fusion could never remain fully free once Yu-Gi-Oh! Became a real card game. If polymerization can combine any 2 creatures according to biological logic, every possible pair requires a result. A physical deck cannot contain the answer to millions of imaginary combinations. A tournament cannot pause while 2 players debate whether a zombie mammoth should poison a 3-headed dragon. Takahashi could decide the result because he controlled the page. The anime could animate that decision because it adapted the page. Players needed text. Pegasus represents the bridge between those worlds. He created dual monsters inside the story, so his deck often appears to understand the game at a deeper level than everyone else's. Relinquished absorbs opposing monsters and wears their strength. Thousand Eyes Restrict pushes that appetite further by combining Relinquished with Thousand Eyes Idle. Its body is covered in watching eyes. It controls the field through paralysis and consumption. The design makes fusion feel sinister. Gaia the Dragon Champion completes 2 compatible monsters. Black Skull Dragon unites friends. Thousand Eyes Restrict turns combination into possession. Pegasus takes other people's monsters, other people's strategies, and even other people's minds. His fusion does the same thing through its anatomy. This is the strength Duel Monsters repeatedly finds in the mechanic. Fusion becomes memorable when the new body reveals a relationship. Attack points help the monster finish the duel. The choice of materials explains the people using it. The manga makes that relationship more visible because it never had to make every transformation agree with a future product line. Thousand Dragon is the clearest example. Joey uses Time Wizard successfully, causing Baby Dragon to age into Thousand Dragon. It is a transformation produced by time. The physical card game classifies Thousand Dragon as a fusion monsters and assigns Baby Dragon and Time Wizard as its materials. even though one of those materials is an effect monster whose entire narrative purpose was causing the transformation. Flame Swordsman creates a similar confusion. Joey uses it as a regular monster in the story. The physical card was released as a fusion requiring Flame Manipulator and Masaki the Legendary Swordsman, two materials with almost no emotional importance to Joey and little relevance to how audiences remember the monster. Anyone trying to rebuild Joey's early anime deck under proper rules discovers that one of his most basic fighters lives in the fusion deck and needs two cards he barely seems to know. These examples are often treated as evidence that the anime got the rules wrong. The history runs in the other direction. The story established an image and a dramatic function. The commercial game later needed to place that image inside a category. Fusion Monster became a practical home for creatures that looked like combinations, evolutions, or advanced forms, even when polymerization had never created them in the original scene. The anime inherited both versions. It was adapting Takahashi's manga while airing beside an increasingly standardized card game. Some moments preserve the comic's fantasy logic. Card frames, deck construction, and later explanations move closer to the product. Flame Swordsman can remain Joey's ordinary frontline warrior in one context and appear as a purple fusion card in another. The contradiction was baked into the adaptation's job. Battle City tries to impose order on all of this. Kaiba redesigns the rules, introduces tribute requirements, raises the starting life points, permits direct attacks, and turns dueling into a city-wide competitive system. Fusion receives a specific restriction. A fusion monster cannot attack on the turn it is summoned. Cards such as Quick Attack exist to bypass the delay. The rule has a sensible, dramatic purpose. Fusion monsters usually arrive with higher attack than the materials that produced them. Forcing them to wait gives the opponent one turn to answer. It makes the summon feel heavy, almost like a large weapon taking time to charge. It also creates a new layer of inconvenience for a mechanic that already demands multiple pieces. A duelist gathers two exact monsters in polymerization, spends them, summons the payoff, and may still have to protect it until the next turn. Later arcs quietly drop this restriction. The physical game never adopts it. Quick Attack becomes a solution to a problem the series stops having. This short-lived rule captures the awkward position Fusion occupies in Battle City. The tournament wants the authority of a serious game. Its additions frequently serve the needs of individual scenes. Once those needs change, the rule fades. Fusion itself becomes more standardized during the arc. Strings combines humanoid slime and wormdrake into humanoid wormdrake. Yugi uses Gazelle, the king of mythical beasts, and Berfomet to create Chimera, the flying mythical beast. These are fixed recipes. The creatures enter as known products instead of biological experiments invented at the moment of impact. Yugi's most important Battle City fusion is Dark Paladin. Dark Magician combines with Buster Blader during his semifinal against Kaiba. The result gains strength from the dragons on the field and gives Yugi a weapon designed for the exact opponent standing across from him. Dark Paladin contains more than a convenient anti-dragon effect. Dark Magician is Yugi's closest monster to an avatar of the Pharaoh. Buster Blader is a specialist built to defeat dragons. Their combination takes Yugi's identity and adapts it to Kaiba's world. Yugi wins without abandoning his ace. He allows that ace to change. Kaiba reaches for Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon again. His development moves through better technology, stronger support cards, and more sophisticated strategies. The final image he desires remains the same three dragons locked together. Dark Paladin is flexible enough to become the answer required by the relationship. Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon is Kaiba insisting that enough force will finally make the relationship end. Kaiba does experiment with another kind of combination. XYZ Dragon Cannon joins X-Head Cannon, Y Dragon Head, and Z-Metal Tank without polymerization. The materials unite through their own ability, closer to machines assembling than creatures melting together. Years later, fans would recognize this general idea as contact-style fusion. Inside Battle City, it fits Kaiba perfectly. His dragons express obsession. His machines express engineering. He finds a way to remove the spell card and make combination feel like hardware. The Battle City final gives Yugi another unusual fusion. Dark Magician and Flame Swordsman create Dark Flare Knight, which later gives way to Mirage Knight after its destruction. The chain combines Yugi's monster with one of Joey's most recognizable fighters, while Joey lies unconscious after his duel with Merrick. Even when Joey cannot stand beside Yugi, an image associated with him enters Yugi's answer. The series never announces this as a grand statement about friendship. It leaves the association sitting inside the materials. I think that restraint helps. Fusion has already taught the audience how to read two characters occupying one monster. The card can carry the feeling without stopping the duel for an explanation. By the end of Battle City, Fusion has become clearer and less surprising. The rules can identify a proper summon. The recipes recur. The strongest examples still depend on character relationships, though the mechanic itself rarely determines how a duelist builds an entire deck. There is a practical reason for that. Yugi's deck is supposed to represent possibility. It contains warriors, spellcasters, beasts, traps, rituals, magnet warriors, Kuriboh, and the Egyptian gods. Giving him a consistent fusion engine would narrow him. His greatest skill is finding a relationship between cards that seem unrelated. Polymerization appears when that talent needs a physical form. The cost is inconsistency. A viewer cannot reliably predict which combinations Yugi carries or how often he can access them. Dark Paladin feels inevitable when Kaiba fills the field with dragons. Drawing Dark Magician, Buster Blader, and Polymerization at the exact time remains an enormous demand for any normal deck. Duel Monsters converts probability into personality. Yugi draws combinations because seeing combinations is who he is. Kaiba's approach is easier to follow. Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon is always available because every material already belongs to his central strategy. Even here, the series rarely examines how awkward it would be to draw all three Blue Eyes and Polymerization while surviving long enough to use them. The spectacle carries the decision. The anime original arcs understand spectacle very well, and they gradually reclaim the freedom Battle City removed. The early virtual game story introduces Five-Headed Dragon as an impossible wall and answers it with Dragon Master Knight, the fusion of Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon and Blackluster Soldier. Yugi and Kaiba have to combine their highest forms. A former enemy and the hero create a monster neither could summon alone. Dragon Master Knight later returns against Darts and appears during the anime's version of the battle against Zork. Those appearances do not come from the manga in the same form. They reveal how the anime staff viewed fusion. It was the easiest visual language for temporary unity. Whenever Yugi and Kaiba face something too large for either of them, their monsters can settle an argument their owners never will. The men remain rivals. Their cards briefly admit cooperation. The Virtual World arc uses older fusions freely, partly because its artificial setting can make almost any card interaction feel appropriate. The Deckmaster rules create another temporary system on top of the card game. Fusion becomes one tool among many. Its exact procedure matters less than the sense that the digital world can retrieve the entire history of the show. Waking the Dragons goes further. The Eye of Timaeus, Fang of Critias, and Claw of Hermos combine with other cards to create new forms. Timaeus joins with monsters connected to Yugi, including Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl. Critias combines with Kaiba's trap cards. Hermos combines with Joey's monsters and frequently creates weapons that another monster or even a duelist can use. Each dragon interprets its owner. Yugi receives character-based fusions because his bond with his monsters has always been personal. Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight, looks like a partnership between two spirits. Kaiba receives machines and weapons formed from traps because he treats cards as systems under his command. Joey receives equipment because his strength often passes through other people. He survives through trust, borrowed chances, and cards given to him by friends. These combinations were anime inventions before many received workable physical versions years later. They return fusion to the logic of Takahashi's early manga. A dragon touches a card, the meaning of that card matters, and a new object appears. Critias can fuse with a trap. Hermos can turn a monster into a sword. The standard recipe system stretches because mythology has entered the duel. The arc's treatment of fusion is wonderfully imaginative and mechanically impossible to predict. Those qualities arrive together. A viewer can enjoy Rocket Hermos Cannon or Mirror Force Dragon as an expression of a character's deck. A player needs card text explaining targets, materials, legal zones, and results. The anime can reveal a new fusion exactly when the plot requires it. The opponent has no reasonable way to prepare for a recipe that did not exist until the draw. This is where Duel Monsters finally makes its choice. Fusion belongs to drama first. Rules are built around the dramatic result afterward. The manga remains more restrained because it has no Waking the Dragons arc, no Noah arc, and no Kaiba entering the memory world to help fight Zork in the same manner. Its major fusions arrive inside Takahashi's main duels, where page space is limited and every new monster has to move the conflict quickly. The anime adds hours of material and repeatedly uses fusion to manufacture escalation, nostalgia, and team-ups. That difference changes the ending. In the manga, the ancient Egyptian conflict pulls duel monsters back toward its mythic source. Monsters are Ka born from human souls and darkness. The story no longer needs polymerization to explain every combined power. The anime keeps the card game iconography more visible and lets Kaiba bring Blue Eyes, Ultimate Dragon, and Dragon Master Knight into the battle against Zork. It inserts one of the show's most familiar solutions into a story about the pharaoh's buried past. I understand why. Dragon Master Knight instantly tells the audience that Yugi and Kaiba have reached the maximum force available through cooperation. It also gives Kaiba a heroic place inside material where the manga largely leaves him outside the memory world. Fusion becomes adaptation glue. It joins Kaiba's anime importance to a manga ending that had developed without him. The final ceremonial duel does not turn into a celebration of fusion. That is appropriate. Yugi's task is to prove that he can stand independently from Atem. The emotional movement is separation. Two souls who have shared one body must become distinct long enough to say goodbye. A mechanic built around permanent combination would pull against the ending's direction. That gives fusion a quiet limit. It can express friendship, rivalry, corruption, adaptation, and shared strength. It cannot solve the central relationship of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because Yugi and Atem eventually need the courage to stop being fused. The original series leaves the mechanic in a strange position. Its fusion monsters include some of the most iconic designs in the franchise. Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, Black Skull Dragon, Dark Paladin, Thousand Eyes Restrict, Gaia the Dragon Champion, and Dragon Master Knight all carry enormous visual weight. Very few characters organize their entire identity around fusion summoning. Polymerization remains a special event rather than the ordinary movement of a deck. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX would take the next step. Jaden's Elemental Hero deck makes fusion a repeatable language. Materials have families. Different combinations answer different opponents. Polymerization becomes something a protagonist expects to use, recover, and use again. GX can build that structure because Duel Monsters spent years discovering what fusion was capable of doing. The original series deserves credit for the discovery and criticism for the disorder. Its rules change. Its card classifications carry leftovers from the manga. Some fusions require exact recipes, some resemble evolution, some assemble themselves, and some invade an opponent's monster. The anime occasionally treats the fusion deck like a known collection, and occasionally treats a new form like a miracle nobody could have listed in advance. I do not think cleaning all of that up would automatically improve the show. Duelist Kingdom's impossible interactions give the monsters physical life. Mammoth Graveyard poisoning Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon says more about the fantasy of the game than a perfectly worded effect could. Black Skull Dragon gives Yugi and Joey's friendship a body. Dark Paladin turns Yugi's flexibility into a warrior designed for Kaiba. The legendary dragons recover the feeling that any two ideas might touch and produce a third. The weaker handling appears between those moments. Fusion rarely has a stable cost. Access to materials depends heavily on the script. Restrictions appear for one tournament and vanish afterward. Several famous cards do not behave like the category assigned to them in the physical game. The series wants viewers to respect strategy while reserving the right to invent a new combination at the exact second strategy runs out. That conflict never fully disappears because it comes from Yu-Gi-Oh's creation. Takahashi made a manga about games revealing people. One of those games became a global product with rules precise enough for strangers to compete. Fusion stood directly on the fault line. The storyteller saw two creatures and asked what they might become. The card game needed one approved answer printed in advance. Duel Monsters keeps moving between those needs. Its best fusion scenes succeed whenever the new monster means more than its attack value. A combination has to reveal an alliance, an obsession, a corruption, or a way of thinking. Once fusion becomes only a convenient large monster, it loses the quality that made it special. So fusion monsters were handled unevenly across the original series. They were never developed into Yugi's main system. Their rules never achieved complete stability. Their importance came from appearing rarely enough to feel like a change in the duel's language. That may be the most faithful outcome possible for Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. The series began with a game that could become anything Takahashi imagined. Fusion preserved a small part of that freedom after the rest of the rules hardened around it. Every time polymerization appeared, the audience was invited to look at two familiar things and wonder what the story could make from them. Sometimes the answer was a knight riding a dragon. Sometimes it was two friends sharing a monster. Sometimes it was Kaiba's obsession compressed into a three-headed monument. Sometimes it was a dead mammoth placed inside that monument until perfection began to rot. The rules struggled to contain all of it. The idea survived because it was larger than the rules.